We've formally begun our council meeting now. Welcome everyone, and a big hello to anybody who chooses to watch the recording of this council meeting after today, to listen to the conversation and to see what councillors have been doing today. Welcome in the online world. So today we'll look at do the confirmation of the agenda. Excuse me if I'm a bit lumpy because I'm looking here and there at my various different agendas and documents. So first of all, are there any apologies for today? I don't think so. We've got a full team. Mark?
Yeah, I have another, there we go, I have another call at about 3:45. So if we're still going then I may have to bail.
Right.
It'll not be.
Sincerely hope we're not going at 4 o'clock. All right, but thank you for that. The confirmation, so I don't think we need to move that be received at this point. If we get there later, we'll do that. Any other apologies or such? No. So now we'll go to the confirmation of the agenda. Just noting there is, for item 11, there is an item that will be going for further discussion to the annual plan meeting and not be revisited. Do you want to explain that a little bit, Becca?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Southgate. Just the recommendation from the Infrastructure Operation Committee was included in the ERA as a recommendation to Council. It will be going to be included as a recommendation to the annual plan Council meetings, and that's where you'll get an opportunity to discuss it further.
Okay.
Your Worship, I have a quick question on the agenda, if I could.
Sure.
Look, maybe I've missed it, but I've looked everywhere for the minutes for the extraordinary meeting of the 25th of March, and my thinking is they should have been confirmed at this meeting. Becca, where did, if they've just been missed out, where did we confirm the extraordinary meetings of the 25th?
I'm just having a look here. Do you mean the 26th of March annual plan council meeting?
No, the extraordinary meeting which we called to provide further delegation to the chief executive prior to level 4 lockdown. I have it listed that occurred on the 25th of March. The only reason I raise it, Your Worship, is that we're confirming a number of minutes in this agenda, and I've gone back to the other ones and I can't find that meeting.
Okay, well look, we'll come back to you on it. I do recall us having that short meeting which we did the delegations, and then of course 3 or 4 days later those were all reverted through the next meeting. So the next day. Yeah, so that all kind of will change. But yes, you're right. If there were minutes accordingly, they probably, if they haven't already been approved, can we just check that, please,
yeah,
Becca?
I can. I've just get confirmation from Amy that those minutes that went to the 25th of March were approved at the 26th of March council meeting.
Oh, so they immediately went.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if Ewan would like to find them, we can help. We can get those to him. Thank you.
We'll get them sent to you, Ewan.
Correct. And Your Worship, I just wanted to know if you wanted me to rate. There was I think a mistake in one of the agenda items, which I'll raise at the time that we actually cover that. So that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. If it's helpful to note to Becca in between, do so. Otherwise, yeah, bring it up at the time is good.
Yeah. Becca, item 9.31, it states Saturday the 20th. It has to be Saturday the 21st. You've mixed the dates.
Okay.
Well done. Well done. That is attention to your reading, to be commended. Okay, confirmation of the agenda. If I could have a mover, Councillor Taylor.
No,
you got a question?
Yes, just
can we raise the hands with the raised hand, bluey hands, if we can remember? But yeah,
it's there, but that's all good. Yeah, no worries.
It's there.
Quick question, just as we were talking about the recommendations from the Infrastructure Operations Committee and the Suburban Response Team trial, that recommendation, Becca, that it's going to the annual plan to be considered. How does that actually work in with timing, given that it's about funding for given the delayed timeframes for our annual plan discussions? How is that? Is there still going to be time to actually discuss that before? Because funding is supposed to start July the 1st for the 2021 year.
Yeah, I might actually, if Sean Hickey's on the line, if he could potentially jump in around that, because it's probably a wider response in terms of anything that might be impacted around funding for the plan. Are you on the line, Sean?
Yeah, he's there. Sean, he is there. He might be. Message him.
Yeah, we might have to come back to that one, Councillor Taylor, if that's okay, because I wouldn't feel confident responding to that question without Sean.
Yeah, look.
Sorry, Councillor Jeff, I was just out of the room. What was the question? Sorry.
The question was, we've deferred the Suburban Response Team trial, that recommendation.
Yep.
About $237,000 for next year to the annual plan discussions.
Mm-hmm.
And given that our annual plan discussions are now taking place at a delayed date, I just want to clarify that we will still actually be able to discuss that before July, before the funding is actually due to start.
Yep. Yeah, we'll make sure that happens. There's we can make sure that happens. So we'll just make sure we get that into a potentially a non-annual plan discussion so that it's all covered off.
Okay. All right.
That's fine. I'll make note to follow that up now.
Thanks, Richard.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Right, we'll get into the confirmation of the agenda, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favour? Aye. Opposed? Anyone opposed? Carried. Thank you. Brings us to declaration. Just before I do, Martin, just to let you know, we can only see your forehead unless you tilt your screen better towards yourself. And because some people might like to look at your face.
Well, all I can say is thank goodness I don't look anything like Councillor McPherson or Councillor Pascoe.
Now.
I am normally much younger, but I'm having some transmission difficulties from this part of the woods. So I do apologise that you're not seeing my accurate face to the viewers out there.
You're looking quite good now, so like that is better than your forehead. Thank you very much.
Well, and I'm sure that's going to have a huge impact politically and electorally, of course.
Councillor Pascoe, what did you want to say?
I was just suggesting that Councillor Gallagher might like to put a coat on, as is befitting of the formalities of a Hamilton City Council meeting.
Come on! All right, let's go. Let's go back to.
I was only following the leadership of our deputy mayor in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, but I will reconsider that during the day.
All right, now, council, we are actually in formal council meeting, and a good sense of humour gets everyone through COVID better. But we better plough on and do some business. Declarations of interest, please. Are there any? Mark.
Yeah, I have. It's not a conflict, but it's a declaration of interest in item C8 in the publicly excluded. The business we're talking about there is a former client of one of my businesses. Is no longer, and it's not material enough to warrant me voting.
Okay, well, we can cover that off when we get there as well, so we'll note that. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Item C8, I need to declare an interest there. I think I have two family members who work for that business, and I would prefer to stay out of that item altogether, please.
Thank you, and so noted. With someone move that the declarations of interest be noted. Councillor Wilson. Anyone else? Councillor no, you can't. You've got your subject to it. Councillor Naidu-Rove. All in favour? Opposed? Carried.
Sorry, Mayor Southgate. Jeff just mentioned item 8. I've got the chair's report as item 8.
In the
sorry, C8.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so that's confirmation declaration, and we haven't got a public forum, but I do note that you have had circulated 2 letters in respect to the item on the climate action report, and those were circulated by Amy. Do you want to say anything else on those, Becca, or we're just going to accept those? They haven't asked for them to be read into the meeting, which we wouldn't do in this circumstance anyway, but they are there. Is there any further action?
So they, just for any members of the public watching, those written submissions will be attached to the minutes for reference. Yeah,
that's right. And councillors will be reading them. So in terms of the confirmation, item 5, the confirmation on page, well, I'm not on Excellion, I'm not on Diligent, sorry. So confirmation of the extraordinary council meeting open minutes of 11th of February. Are there any questions? No, there being none. Could I please have a mover and seconder for those minutes?
Move.
Councillor Wilson, Councillor Naidu Rauf, all in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I'm just looking for hands. Thank you. None opposed. Okay, that brings us up to the next item, which is, which I'm scrolling down too madly, which is the confirmation of the council minutes, 19th of March 2020.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any comments? Do I have a second to Councillor Taylor? Thank you. Question there, or just a seconding, Councillor Taylor?
Seconding.
Thank you very much. Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Didn't see anybody opposed. If you were opposed and I missed you, you have to shout out, please. That would be really helpful. Moving down to the open minutes. Hang on, what's the next bit on the agenda there? I'm just getting ahead of myself here. Confirmation of the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting April the 2nd. Is that the one I'm up to, Becca?
Yes.
I haven't missed one, have I? No. Okay, cool. Any questions on those ones? No? Someone so moved, please. Councillor Bunting, Councillor Wilson, all in favour?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, so that brings us to, oh gosh, it brings us to the next item.
Cheers.
Yep. Sorry?
I was just saying,
Chair's report.
The Chair's report.
Yeah, just scrolling. It's not as, because on Diligent you get that lovely tab thing, which does work very well. So I'm just getting to the right page. Chair's report's on page 37. It doesn't really require that much conversation.
I'll move.
Thank you. I'm happy to second. Are there any questions on it? I don't. Oh, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wish to comment in the debate. Thanks.
Okay, in the debate, are there any questions for clarity? No questions. So it's been moved by Councillor Wilson, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
Seconded it by myself, and we'll go to debate.
As a mover, I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Look, I'm pleased that a detailed discussion on the living wage and a decision is being deferred today, and I certainly support the motion. We were promised back in February at the briefing then that this on the subject, that this was the start of a journey, and I felt over the last month as the direction of travel has gone that we were heading towards a decision. So the opportunity to have a further briefing on this is, in my view, very, very wise. I had a look back at the past work that Council has done on the living wage, and there were 2 major reports back in 2013 and 2015. And both those reports suggest to me that at this stage that there's a lot more work that still needs to be done so that Council has a full report when we get to a decision. And so I'm hopeful that as we move towards that decision, the staff will go back and look at those earlier reports and bring forward some of the issues, including the cost, to us for a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pascoe. Any further debate? No. Oh, yes. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with delaying the item until we can get a more full report, though I would caution about those earlier reports, especially the 2013 one, which had figures put in it that were deliberately designed to put people off the living wage. And I say that advisedly, having had some discussions with some of the staff involved at that time and the instructions that they had received. So I would not take those old reports as gospel. I think what we need now are the new figures for the current council, and to look at them. That's what's going to be important when we make our decision. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Van Ooston.
Yes, I'd like to also support Councillor McPherson in those most recent comments. I'm a little disappointed with the continued delay, but do support that we have the opportunity, of course, to be able to discuss it in full with a balanced view from all parties. I think it's really important that we also look at the time that we're in, actually, and the importance that council's leadership in this area would be able to send a very clear signal to our community that these are really important, fair and timely discussions in the COVID-19 stimulus and response that we'll be bringing forward. So delaying again is unfortunate, but I'd like to signal that, you know, I'm really keen to be able to look at a way to find a fair pathway for us to be able to deliver it with some urgency.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, thank you. We're obviously discussing some other issues in public excluded, of which I'll be addressing we've got a broader issue around the wage and salary bill. My sentiments broadly echo Councillor McPherson and Councillor Van Ooston. I have read recent media reports of two very, very mean supermarket chains that have apparently chopped a 10% bonus off their hard-working and heroic staff at this time. I work out that 10% bonus was just a mere...
well, I know you've...
I'm actually building my argument. Your worship, please hear me out. I'm building an argument. This
come to council. That's fine, but come to the council side of things, please.
I will. Let me assure you, Madam Chair, I will. And this is building an argument. And the key word is the mean supermarkets paying a minimum below a living wage to hard-working supermarket staff. However, can I also make the point that those same two mean supermarkets, in my humble view, this is a personal opinion, in terms of the reports I have read in the media around the issue of the bonus, I note that also in September, those same supermarket chains are planning apparently to introducing a living wage for all their workers. So that is a very positive development, and I look forward to this council reflecting on that. I have nothing further to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. I have Councillor O'Leary next.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Sorry, I tried to get in just before debate. Just a question on process. The report talks about the minimum wage, council's minimum wage, which is different to the living wage. And everyone seems to be debating the living wage. So am I to assume that the deferral report is going to be on the council minimum wage and living wage together? Because it doesn't really say that. Sorry, I did try to get in before debate.
So, yeah, oh, sorry. Yes, I'm happy for that, Council. And if I missed your...
That is correct. That is correct, Councillor O'Leary. It is going to reflect the minimum wage and the living wage.
Great. Thanks, CE.
Sorry about that. And look, I am trying to look for the little blue hands up, but they pop up and depends where I am. So if I've missed you before we move on to the next stage, holler out just with a little bit of a oi, excuse me, or something, because that will help me if not miss people. I think I now have Margaret, Councillor Forsyth, followed by Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair Paula. Yeah, look, I too am looking forward to some more recent information, and I'm also looking forward to a less biased presentation of what living wage actually means to us all. I know we've had one side of the story, and I'm really looking forward to an objective presentation where we can really sit down and process the information and make some really good decisions based on clear, unbiased, current information.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor Southgate. Look, there's been a 2 or 3 lovely political speeches on this, so I just thought I'd better weigh in and provide one on the other side of the argument, which is that, as everyone around this table would know, we're actually in an unprecedented time in terms of the financial situation. And the day by day, the costs to this council of the lockdown are becoming clearer to us, and the costs to this council of what we are going to witness in the next 2 or 3 years are going to be significant. It is a time to invest in our city, which we as a council are going to do, but it's also a time to be very prudent with our own finances and be very careful leading into the annual plan, because the revenue loss that we are suffering.
So this is going to get to the wages? This is going to get...
Well, yeah, because what I'm saying is we've had lovely political speeches about how it must happen, but what I'm saying is it comes at a cost, and councillors need to weigh up that cost.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. Holler if I've missed you. We're in debate. Okay, because this is a formal, more formal than just accepting the minutes, though that is formal, I will do a proper count of hands. So all in favour, please raise your hands now. It's just to receive the report. Yeah, Councillor Wilson, me, Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Pascoe, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Naidoo-Rove, Councillor Gallagher, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Van Oosten. Councillor Hamilton is not with us at the moment. So there is no one dissenting, so that's the count. Or is that okay, Becca?
Yeah, so the motion is carried unanimously with Councillor Ryan not being present in the room.
Okay, thank you. That brings us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Unit Manager Strategy and Corporate Planning Report. Julie, Sean, are you running through this or Julie running through this?
Good morning, Mayor Paula.
Good morning, Julie. Okay, well, off you go.
Okay, I will just start my video so you can see me, which always helps. Good morning, Mayor Paula and councillors. This report is to provide you with an update of the progress that...
Could you just speak a little louder, please?
This report is to provide you with an update of the progress we're making towards the Climate Action Plan. As presented previously to Council, we had undertaken an emissions stocktake for Hamilton City Council, and this report contains some suggested actions that will be included in our long-term plan for reduction of some of our emissions. We also have included in this report the information that we've received through the Hamilton City Council Greenhouse Gas Emission Inventory Report, and as expected, that highlighted as a city, the majority of our emissions arise from transport and also what they call stationary energy, which is energy used within businesses effectively. I am happy to take questions from elected members.
Okay, I'm sure there are some. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
I agree entirely with you, Councillor Taylor, and our world has changed from when we started writing this report. So the 10 years reference was most probably when we started writing this report. It was still something that hadn't become the norm like it has now. So yes, we do understand life is different and that we do expect things like Zoom to have a significant impact about the way we work in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Yeah, and I thought Margaret made a really good point the other day, and you know, I'd love to see us use Zoom a lot more straight away and restrict some of our visits into the office, into the building. Now, the other thing was just the biogas-fired engine at the wastewater treatment plant on the same page.
Yes.
And do we have, and the Water World electric hot water heat pumps at Waterwell, do we have any indication on cost of those?
No, at the moment, we have made the comment in here, both of these projects are part of our 10-year plan program. If I just talk about the Waterworld pumps first, they are part of the renewal program. They're scheduled for renewal in 2024. The asset managers at the moment are working on developing that renewal program as part of the long-term plan, and as part of that process they'll make an assessment and get some information around the cost and the difference, if there is any difference between going for a electric option versus a boiler option. The same with the biogas fired engine is a little bit different because it is a new project, it's not a renewal, but they are at the moment working on that project with the view of scoping it up for it to be included as a proposal as part of the 10-year plan.
So it's too early to know.
Too early, yeah.
Just one last question. Thanks, Mayor Southgate. Thank you. Page 34, the climate modelling that is going to be commissioned in the 2021 year, and that hasn't come back to the annual plan yet. Is that a cost that we know about, or is this another cost?
The cost for that we put as part of the estimate for the additional money that was asked to support the Environment Committee in the annual plan. We haven't specifically gone out and requested a scope of work for that yet to get a good indication of the cost. We've made a very rough estimate at this stage.
Okay, so it's included in our costs and the figures. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Mayor Southgate.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Taylor. We've now got, oh, no, Sarah, you're not up. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks. I was just looking at the notes above where Jeff was talking about the description of an electric gator, which my mind boggled trying to work out what one of them would be. But my question, Julie, was actually related to the workshop discussion that we had about about a week ago, or maybe a week and a half, I can't remember, with all these Zoom meetings. I just wanted to check that there were lots of suggestions discussed there about developing this, furthering this, using other information, that they're all going to be able to be taken on board for going ahead forward with this.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McPherson. The workshop was really valuable in terms of giving us some direction, but also, hearing those those requirements. So at the moment, we are scheduling a whole lot of facilitated conversations with a range of parties, including Go Eco, businesses, other organisations. So that's underway. And yes, we made a note of the additional things that were raised and your feedback on how this report, the climate action plan, should be structured. And
how it looked as well,
yes,
with
definitely,
the
yep.
visuals.
Yes, yep. So that draft, working draft we had there, was very much a sort of a place for us to put ideas, and the end product will look quite different.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm just
workshop.
I'm just following the list of hands as it goes down. So I notice now they move around a little bit. So bear with me. I did have Sarah up first. I'll go there. Sarah.
Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Jolie, for all the work that you've done on this. And I know it's been a lot on your plate. In terms of a few questions. In terms of, I guess, between now and 2030, are we going to be able to have a bit of a roadmap in terms of having some interim steps in terms of targets? So I'm just concerned that if we're not having kind of a clearer roadmap around a gradual reduction, getting to that 50% reduction, we might kind of end up leaving a lot of this to the to the last few years or something.
No, we do have a clear timeline for these actions, and so Martin, who you'll know, has been working hard with the business to work out when these changes can be put in place, and we have got a map out to 2030. So we will definitely convert that into a visual timeline with those milestones in it.
Awesome. And on the back of Councillor Jeff's question, the timing, I think, with the smarter travel options, there's a lot that we could be doing now in that space. And you did mention that there's a survey that's going to be done in terms of what barriers there are for employee travel options. Do you know when that will be available?
So we have started that survey. So we're surveying staff. We thought now's a good time to ask staff how they used to travel to work pre-COVID, and what barriers do they have in terms of taking a more alternative or active form of transport, and things like car sharing as well. I mean, interesting enough, it wasn't until COVID that David and I discovered we actually live about 4 houses down from each other. So things like that, we wanted to get an understanding of that from staff. So we commenced that survey last week. We're going to run it for 3 weeks, and then we'll be able to bring that back to council. We are also, as I said, starting the facilitated conversations with businesses and organisations. And part of the conversation we want to have with them is ask them, do they have travel plans? Do they know how their staff travel to work? Have they asked their staff about alternative modes, etc.? So that is going to be a really good source of information for us.
Yeah, that sounds really good. In terms of, I guess, I think there's an opportunity here to create a bit of an example for other businesses so that they can see our travel plan and say, oh yeah, okay, well that's what it looks like and that's what the council's doing, including things like, trying to encourage conferences to provide online options and things, so we are flying less for training and conferences. Is that something we could, just being wary of workload and things, but is that something that we could have reported back to us at an upcoming meeting at some point, or in terms of an interim step for the climate action plan?
I'll make a note of that. We need to have that conversation. So within Eva Lisa's team, she has a transport team and a transport coordinator, and they're doing a lot of work around this as well. So this is where the climate action plan is something that actually crosses across the whole organisation. It's not solely owned by anyone, and my team, if anything, act as facilitators to try and pull all these things together. And so I'll take an action that we'll have a conversation with Eva Lisa and her team, and then definitely we can bring something about what's happening about that.
Thank you. A couple more things. One was in regards to buildings. There's a little bit around renewals and including more energy efficient, I guess, solutions in when we're doing renewals and stuff in our buildings. Are we going to look at including more around energy efficiency and how we might increase standards in renewals when we are doing that? But also, I'm interested in new buildings because we had a presentation from Andrew Eagles from the Green Building Council a couple of weeks ago around Green Star ratings and things, and I understand that currently we don't have any intention to pursue any Green Star rating for, say, the Rototuna Town Centre or other projects going on which we're kind of supporting as a council also don't have any intention to be rated. So is that something we could also look at for future energy efficiency?
Yes, definitely. In terms of it needs to be a conversation with the managers of those projects, and I will take an action again to talk to find out about those from Paul Cow and his asset team and Emily around what is happening around facility management in terms of looking at that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
but we can't commit to anything until we've sort of had a bit more information.
Possibly it might be that we need more information to come back to council because there could be additional costs or things, but just to have that opportunity. Once again, I think it's a
questions at the moment, Sarah.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's all right. Very, very good points. Save them for the debate. But the question is, can we have those?
Yes. Can we have that reported back? Yeah.
Yes.
With costings and options.
Thanks. That's perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm finished now.
Maxine, Councillor Van Oosten.
Thank you, and thanks, Julie, for the report and all the work that you've done and the ability to be able to bring us all in through other conversations and Zoom meetings, etc. My question is with regard to consultation, and I acknowledge that there is the desire to do that, and that our current situation has required that we delay that a little. And again, delay creates further delay down the line in terms of being able to put the project to work. It's incredibly important that stakeholders have the opportunity to input into that. And are there the alternative ways for you to be able to get that kind of consultation done and the feedback that you're needing in order to fulfil that part of the plan?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Maybe if I just start by talking about, most probably there are two types of consultation. At the moment, we're trying to engage people in the development of this plan. And so, yes, that is a form of consultation, but it is actually having these facilitated conversations on one-on-one sessions where we get a really good understanding of people's opportunity of where they are at and where they can input into like a Hamilton City Accord, a wider thing. So that's happening at the moment. Once, and again, if you have anyone who you specifically want us to talk to, please let us know. We've got a list, I think if it's about 30 people we're talking to at the moment, which is organisations and businesses and community groups, and trying to work out how can we, they have to be by Zoom at the moment, and how can we have those conversations as facilitated workshops. Once we do have something like a climate accord, we would then, of course, like to do some wider conversations with the community about that. And that's where that second type of consultation comes in, where we actually then have something a little bit more concrete, where we can go out to people and say, do you feel included in this? Is your voice actually represented in this? And get that feedback, which you'd like to take on board before you adopt the final accord.
Do you have, oh God, I mean, it's incredibly difficult at the moment, but any timelines established around both of those types of consultation?
So the facilitated conversations are happening in May, so we're doing those now, or starting from next week. And then in terms of the consultation on the final document would have to be after it's adopted, adopted by council for consultation, which we would envisage would be somewhere about July, August.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Van Oosten. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Julie, for your work thus far. I know in really constrained circumstances, first of all, from a staffing point of view, but from secondly, with your extra work during the emergency management as well. So I really understand the constraints that you've been working under, so thank you very much. Just a couple of questions around the report, and actually Councillor McPherson headed in the direction I was going, that and I still wasn't clear of the answer though, that this report has or has not taken into account the feedback from our workshop?
This council report was mostly written
before. Yeah, okay, cool, kind of figured that.
Yep.
Great, thank you. So that next chunk of the climate action plan is in train, with consultation coming up, both community-wise and then of course with council also. That's good to know. A couple of questions around, I'm sorry, I don't have the point here, but just talking about surveying staff on their transport plans. I do recall that we had, last time I was on council, that we had a carpool capability or a carpool app or something similar for use by staff at council. And look, I wonder if that's something that can be recalled, or you can just dig around and find out if that's still working or not, because there's no point reinventing the wheel. I know that work was done and Councillor Bell at the time had a lot to do with that. So potentially there's some data and something that you can make use of. Secondly, point 26, you talked about rail emissions data not being available from Kiwi Rail. Given the improvements and the increased infrastructure, etc., that we're going to be having with rail, I wonder if we can require more data from Kiwi Rail there, because that form of transport is only going to increase, and that's going to affect other transport modes. So I think that information will be really important to have.
Yes, we've already gone back to the providers of this report, and there are a couple of areas where we have asked specifically for more data. So that's one of them. And there are a few things in this report that we wanted greater clarification around as well. So we're still waiting for some of that response as well.
Great, thank you. And just following up from Councillor Thompson's comments about Green Star building standards as well, that we may or may not be able to directly influence developers to take up Green Star building rating, but we certainly can show leadership, and we can take a front foot approach in the way we build our buildings in those growth areas. So that's something that we can capture in our action plan, and of course with our climate accord as well, which I think is going to be a really powerful tool, not only in leadership but for bringing our community on board.
So just questions at this time, Margaret. Yes, please.
The points 36 and 37 are maybe heading a little bit into 40. I just noted that there more from the rural sector, New Zealand beef and lamb and dairy, requiring or urging central government to line up their domestic and international carbon and methane emissions. Now, I know that our reports largely say that our emissions are from transport, but I just wonder, when we're talking about targets, are we able to have some clause in there or some point in there that lines up with where our central government goes with those decisions? So at the moment it is as is, but there is potential for that to change, and I think it would be really helpful to have a national standard, but also for us to line up with that as well. So is there a way that we can express some flexibility in our targets and make sure that they line up with those when and if they change?
Yes, so at the moment what we're suggesting is that we work towards the Climate Change Response Amendment Act targets, which are the national ones, and we are suggesting there's sort of two components to that for us in terms of a two-step approach to getting to that target. So we are suggesting that the target for net emissions, excluding the biomethane, is net zero by 2050. We're suggesting that we want to reduce our current emissions by 50% by 2030 as a step towards that, and then once we've got there, look at how do we get to net zero emissions by 2050. We will always have emissions, and getting to net zero means that you would need to buy offsets to actually cover those emissions that we have left. So what we want to do is focus first, rather than buying offsets and focus on the easy option, we actually want to focus on how do we actually reduce our emissions, because that'll have a long-lasting effect. And then once we've got those down as low as we can, then look at what is the other ways to get to the net zero by offsets, etc. So if the government changes those targets, we can definitely be aligned to those by making sure we're aligned to the government targets.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was the main thrust of my point. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got Rob, and then I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Paula. Thanks, Julie, for your work on this project, and echoing Councillor Dave's earlier comments, that I did appreciate the opportunity to discuss this report and have questions answered prior to the lockdown, and that was very useful. Have we had any initial feedback from the community and from the advocates for the Climate Action Plan, including those who sought an emergency rather than a plan, as to the content in this plan and how it would be useful not only for council but for them to advance forward in terms of changing our environment?
Mostly not yet. So we have been waiting to get that base information about the emissions for Hamilton City, because that really gives us a basis for having a shared conversation with various groups about where we want to focus and how can we focus together. We have had prior to the lockdown some discussions with Go Eco around things that they thought are really important and people that they really want to make sure are involved in the conversation. And that conversation was a little bit wider as well around sustainability as well. So most probably not yet is the answer. That's what we're hoping to have for this next round of facilitated conversations.
Is it possible that this plan, in its rawness at the moment, and hopefully where it might get refined, could become community driven, with the council as a participant rather than it being the council's plan and everyone else doing their own plan, which is part of what we've got, but maybe what they want. And that way, we're really achieving what I think we set out to do last August, and that is for us to lead to the community an outcome that they could pick up and make the changes and then drive the changes.
Yes, definitely, and that's where we'd like to go, and that's why we want to call it a climate accord for the city rather than a climate action plan by Hamilton City Council. And so that's why this next round of conversations are really important to tell the story and bring organisations and community groups onto this journey and take ownership of this, hopefully. So yes, the answer, short answer is yes. That's the aspiration.
We'd be telling those 30 groups that you mentioned earlier in the questions that this is a plan that we're hopeful that they'll pick up,
yes, and
run it as a community project rather than as a council owned plan.
Yeah, and particularly also businesses. So, as we've said, a lot of our emissions are generated from transport, and the bulk of that isn't actually. Some of it is definitely personal trips, and that's a individual and community sort of advocation type role. But a lot of it is actually generated through businesses and the fleet that they run to deliver their business. So we really want to make sure that we have some really good conversations with business to understand what they are already doing in terms of improving fleet efficiency or moving towards more fuel appropriate sources like EVs, whatever. Yeah, so both.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Julie, I've just a couple of questions I'll come back to you, Margaret. Just got a couple of questions myself on that, which I scribbled onto my iPad last night, so just bear with me. The outline of the climate action plan on page 30 of that report, or the agenda, page 30 of diligence. When we first set off having this conversation, we were doing a plan for Hamilton City Council, not Hamilton City, of which we were a part. That seems to have changed. Has it changed, or is this still our City Council approach? Because it's on one hand, it's very city-centric, City Council-centric, and on the other hand, we're talking about reaching further.
Yeah. So the original intention was to have a plan for the city, and then Hamilton City Council, like most organisations, will have a climate action plan. So we have undertaken both of those processes at the same time.
Right.
The idea with the climate accord, that is the plan for the city, the wider city, where Hamilton City Council, along with many others, will be a partner towards delivering that. In addition to that, we have done our own Hamilton City Council action plan, which we will separate out from the accord and bring back as a sort of a separate action plan specifically for the City Council.
So from where we were to where we are now, we've come into a bit of a fusion. Is that what you're saying, between what we're going to do in-house,
yes,
and what we're going to do as part of the wider community? Is that right?
Yeah, and most probably actually made it more separate. So actually from the feedback from the workshop is actually being able to actually understand specifically what are we doing as a corporate organisation, and that should be our action plan. But then we will be a key influencer and a key leader in the City Accord. A lot of the infrastructure we build as the City Council will influence that.
All right. I don't want to get into commentary. I'll just ask this quick for me, but I did find the language sometimes Hamilton City, Hamilton, and very rarely Hamilton City Council. I was confused sometimes which Hamilton you were referring to at which moment. There's a couple of questions. I'll just, excuse me, whipping through me. In terms of, I note that the small percentage of issue that is from council car fleet.
Yes.
Having said that, at some stage, are we going to look at, no matter what the size of the impact is, what the cost is? Because I would imagine that to change out of a council car fleet, given we've got loop and we're going that way anyway, is going to be a small investment, right? Small gain, but it's also very easy to do, like the low-hanging fruit. So will we get some idea about those sort of things that can be done at very minimal cost to get change quite quickly, albeit if they're only a small slither of the overall carbon emissions, it's still worth doing?
Emily is working, so Emily, who's our facilities manager, is working as part of the renewal program for the fleet. So any changeover will be part of that program. I don't have the detail to speak to that, but again, I can take an action to ask Emily to come back with their thoughts on that.
I guess I think at some stage we're going to need cost benefit sort of analysis of where we put our activities. There are going to be some things that are worth doing because the impact is huge, and some things are going to be worth doing because they're really easy to incorporate into business with minimal change or minimal cost. That was the nature of my question. We'll get to have further understanding of what we as an organisation, Hamilton City Council, can do as we go forward.
Yes, and
the business case for it.
Yes, and one of the things we've said, particularly when we're talking about, in the report we talked about other parts of the business looking out at swapping out their diesel fleet towards electric or battery powered fleet, and we have purposely put the comment in there that we will consider not only the climate benefit of doing that, but the equipment needs to still be able to be fit for purpose. So we need to make sure that the options that are selected have a range of factors that are considered.
Thank you. And the last one relates to the paragraph on page 33, using smarter travel options, which I don't disagree, it's good work in there. I noticed it didn't talk about and talked about the type of vehicles, diesel, electric, etc., unless I missed it, reducing flying and so on, but it didn't talk about modal shift, which is something that we talk about a lot in other parts of the organisation. Is there some way that modal shift conversation can be captured there? Maybe I have read it, but maybe I've missed something, and just add in there that there are other forms of unnecessary travel that we might be exploring going forward.
Yes, we can add that in.
Not just flying, but yes, just to kind of make sure that can we make the message consistent with what we're doing in the transport and infrastructure areas around modal shift, not just types of vehicles.
Yes, and to facilitate us achieving that, that's why we decided we actually needed to find out from staff how they do travel for coming to and from work, but also the survey also asks about once they are at work, what is their choice of transport option to travel.
Brilliant. For work. Thank you. I don't see any other hands up. You don't have your hand up, Margaret? No? No, cool. Okay, so I'll just scroll up to the recommendation, which I think is.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson.
Oh, second. You jumped in there in front of me, Ewan.
Okay.
You can move if you like, Sarah. Let Sarah move it.
Happy to be flexible. Would you like to move it, Sarah? No, she's relaxed with it. So Councillor Wilson has moved, Councillor Thompson has seconded, and I'm sure there are some comments and debate. So I'm just going to run down a random list of councillors so everybody gets a chance to say. If you don't want to debate, just wave me off. It'll be easier than trying to track hands. And we'll start with the mover, of course.
Look, my comments will be brief. I think Hamilton City Council needs to play a leadership and pivotal role in encouraging a clear and meaningful and timely response to the climate challenge. And I think the report helps build a clearer picture. I am concerned that we're not doing enough quickly enough, but I take on board some of the complexities that modal shift and other things bring to the broader equation. So I'm also looking forward to getting more detail in terms of costs and how we as a city can manage that and incorporate that into our 10-year plan, because I think we will need to prioritise a number of significant projects under our current situation. And this is one of the projects, and in fact is the living wage, in my opinion, I know, that would float to the top in my personal priorities. So I'm looking forward to having clearer optics as to what those finances are. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Paula. I want to thank Julie again for her work on this and emphasise the need for some extra resourcing as we move into the annual plan. There's a lot of extra work to do in regard to this, and staff time needed to work alongside of all of these organisations and businesses in the community who we hope will come along with us on this journey. I think that there are some really good opportunities here for the council to play a leadership role, say whether it's in doing our travel planning and then providing that as an example to other organisations and businesses, or with Green Star rated buildings, showing that it's actually not that expensive or not that hard to do, and really influencing the market through our own procurement and the way that we spend our own dollars. I think today's report really focuses on our own emissions. We've got a lot more work to do in terms of how we tackle our emissions as a wider city, but I think it is a really good start. There's some extra work to be done in terms of how do we reduce our emissions from the infrastructure that we build, and looking at those embedded emissions in concrete, the things that we purchase through, and how we can change things like our procurement policy in order to actually tackle those other emissions which currently aren't accounted for in this report or in this data. I also think in terms of adaptation, this is really crucial that we actually understand the impact that climate change will have on Hamilton and will have on our own infrastructure that we're putting in, not only able to safeguard current infrastructure, but ensuring that the future infrastructure that we put in is fit for purpose, and is going to continue to be fit for purpose as the climate changes. So in that respect, getting more information around climate modelling and understanding the risks to Hamilton are going to be really crucial. And that is going to mean that funding for the Environment Committee is, really important. So thank you again, Julie, for your work on this, and I look forward to continuing to get to a final plan.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor O'Leary.
Thank you. Some technical glitches. You didn't want me back in the meeting. I know I've missed the question, so I'm just going to raise my points for staff through the debate. That I'm hoping that with this plan, while I understand the Environment Committee will have oversight, that it doesn't get lost in the hierarchy of some of other councils' plans that Councillor McPherson likes to call coffee table books, and that, and rightly so with some of them, but that actually it does sit within a hierarchy of council strategies and plans, that it's actually effective and doesn't become lost in the mix. I think that's really important when we look at the Strategic Growth Committee. We should have in mind our climate action plan. When we look at infrastructure, when we look at economic development, all of those committees need to have some input from this plan when it's finalised. So actually I'd be interested in having a discussion on how we're going to do that, because we haven't done that very well in the past, and I refer to the great plans of their day, like the Hamilton East and the Frankton plan. So, sorry, I had to kind of wheedle that into my debate. Oh, no!
What's that?
Sorry, I thought I was kicked out again.
Oh, no, you're still here.
And you've woken us all up with your scream.
As well, wasn't potty mouth just then, right? Thank you.
So, you're done? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going down a list, councillors. So everyone, if you don't want to speak, just wave me off. But this is the easiest way for me to manage it. So, Councillor Pascoe.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, back in August 2019, I co-sponsored the motion to support an urgent climate action plan, and that was an alternative to declaring a climate emergency at that particular time, which was being advocated by the community. And I come back to this need to link in what we're doing with the community. So apart from the changes within our own organisation, this report today signals a great starting point to allow council to lead, but as one stakeholder and partner, the community and the other active stakeholders to get on with the job of identifying the issues around climate change and working collaboratively towards making that change. I see this differently perhaps to Councillor O'Leary, where this becomes another one of these council reports that we take full responsibility for going forward. And I think the success of doing it as a community-driven organisation is that those in the community who came to us initially and advocated for that change can now get on with the task of change and promoting the solutions that we need. I don't see this whole issue of climate change being the sole responsibility of council, and yet I detect, somehow in amongst the discussion and the debate, it is, and we have to fund it all. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I think what Councillor O'Leary was saying was that very much along your line, that she wants this to be an active implementational plan. So I think she's agreeing with you there, and she's nodding. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you.
No, thanks, Paula. Others are speaking very well on this, and I'm content to listen to them. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate that it's really important that we understand our baseline, our foundation, where we are starting from, what we are currently doing, and that to date has taken some time. So while we all want to get somewhere quickly, I often say, in order to go fast, you've got to go slow. So the time that we've spent, well, not we, but the time that staff have spent really gathering that baseline data is really important. And just please be patient with the process. And of course now lockdown has really put things, made things more difficult to action as well. But I think the Climate Action Accord is the key thing here. Not only can we be leading in what we're doing as an organisation, but by bringing stakeholders together, big and small, and really working together as one, supporting each other, but also we even talked about having some sort of Climate Action Accord star rating, so that it was something that we could set a standard for, set a benchmark, so to speak, and then really encourage anyone else in the community that wants to join to come on board with us. So there's a real leadership opportunity for us there, plus a collaborative opportunity. So I hope that speaks to your questions, Councillor Pascoe. As far as leading within council and have an overarching influence over all council committees, I see a potential for, even when it comes to committee agendas, that front and face of an agenda are our climate action principles, which just remind us and bring us back to our overall responsibility and our overall principles that we said that we would follow as a council in relation to our responsibility for our environment. So thank you for your patience thus far, councillors, and thank you for your work thus far, Julie, but we still have plenty of work to do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton? No, good. Who have I got? Councillor Van Oosten.
Thanks very much. I'll be really brief. I see that we're a really big business in town, and the first step of looking at the way we do our business is a really responsible beginning point. And that can lead to modelling the kinds of behaviours that we want to be able to see beyond our business into the rest of Hamilton. And so I think it's a really good approach. I think that an accord is a great way to be able to start that and to send the kinds of signals and identify actions that we will take, meaningful actions that we're going to take. Consultation is really important to me though, and that provides a voice for those individual stakeholders and key groups to be able to give us their knowledge and their solutions that they have the expertise in order to be able to provide. And so I see that as being a really important part of this. We don't have all the answers, but I'm positive that they're out in our community as well. So once we have adopted an accord as a council, the next part of that and involving the rest of our community is going to be a really important way to being sure that what we talk about is able to be delivered, and that we as leaders in the community here have the mandate in order to be able to do that. So thank you. I see this as a journey and that this is a really good beginning to it. I would like it to be a bit quicker, as I'm sure others would, but taking a slow, steady and planned approach is wise.
Thank you, Councillor Van Oosten. Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Paula. Look, I agree with many of the comments, particularly Ewan's and Sarah's at the start, and also the comments made by Rob and others about the need for this to be a community plan. I would see us aiming for a Hamilton Metro plan, something that reflects the geographical area that we're having to plan for at the moment, out to into the commuter belt and so forth. So we don't just look at, for instance, vehicle emissions within the city boundary, but between Cambridge and Hamilton, and start to influence and work on those wider geographical areas as well. I see this plan as adding some meat to the bones of the coffee table book that we had previously, Angela. But it also is obviously just the start of something. The carbon footprint problem of Hamilton City, like a lot of other cities in New Zealand, is in the main vehicle driven, and some of the information coming through from the lockdown areas around the world, I haven't seen it yet from Hamilton, shows a huge drop in emissions and improvement in air quality as industry and vehicle travel reduced during the lockdowns. And for those that have said in the past, I'm not saying there's anyone on our current council, though there were some on the previous council, saying that humans weren't the ones causing climate change. I think they just need to look at the changes in air quality in some of the major cities of the world during lockdowns and the improvements. So I think it's actually quite timely. We can see the effect we can have if we do the work to change things. And I think this starts to provide us some good information. I'm particularly keen on the focus on travel and modes of travel, travel plans. We urgently need a travel plan for our organisation. That's where I'd put some early effort and speed. We need to encourage organisations like the DHB, the biggest employer in Hamilton, to do much, much, much better. That has a zero travel type policy at the moment. It doesn't care how people get there, and it concentrates on building more and more parking buildings at the moment for staff and for patients as well, and visitors and so forth. So that's an organisation we really need to do some work with. It was starting before the not so lamented health minister sacked the board a few months ago, Martin, you might remember. We were starting to do some work in that area. It seems to have gone off the radar at the moment. We need to put it back on the radar of that organisation and others. And I'll actually say something complimentary about a private sector organisation. Fonterra is actually paying some attention to this area at the moment through their public engagement person, Philippa Furi, who's doing quite a lot of work in that area. They've been supportive of the train, of car sharing plans for their staff going to meetings and things like that. We want to see, and they're basically getting their own travel plan together. We want to see all those big organisations doing it. We can be example, but not until we have our own travel plan up and running, and we haven't done that yet. So I want to see some practical things come out of a plan like this, and I'm very hopeful that it will. I'm quite pleased about the discussions we've had both today and in the workshop a week or two ago, because I think they were very useful. Let's have more of them, and let's be practical in our application of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McPherson. Councillor Cash Nadirov?
Most of it's been said already, and I agree with many of the comments. Just to commend Julie and team on the great work you've done so far, and I look forward to the collaborative approach that we're now taking.
Thank you. Councillor Gallagher?
Thank you. And I think I certainly concur with the Deputy Mayor. Now's not the time for political speeches, and I certainly didn't hear that in the previous item, but I want to say that in the context of the huge challenges we face as an organisation. And I agree, I think, with Councillor Van Oosten, who said, excuse me, that we must exercise leadership as a corporate, as an organisation. And just as we're going to, of course, continue to exercise leadership in how we treat all of our staff who are doing essential work, because their essential work, all of them, is going to be fitting into this whole climate change action plan. I'm also mindful of the point you yourself in your questioning, Mayor Paula, talked about, being Waikato wide, not just Hamilton only in our terminology. And I'm very mindful of Councillor McPherson's talk of coffee table books, because this is another good report, which obviously has to be council taking a leadership approach across the region. And also, quite frankly, we have to be looking at, I think, the excellent future-proof work, how that ties in with this. The Waikato plan, in terms as it's currently structured, is that fit for purpose in terms of this work? So we all have to be, working in a synergy. Councillor Thompson, I noted some of your questioning. It's very interesting you raise about, online, people going away from conferences, flying around the country and going online. And obviously we will see a change of trends, but that will have huge implications potentially for Hamilton's ability or Hamilton's current plans through Te Waka to attract conferences to the city, types of conferences. What does that mean potentially for the future of Claudelands? And I'm not saying that as a negative at all, but I'm saying that as obviously we're going to have to, when we look at our economic growth models and economic promotion of tourism, visitors, we're going to have to rethink and work out exactly how that's going to work. Because very clearly, even us being leaders, a number of us are going to be saying, well, is this particular meeting more appropriate for online Zoom type of meetings? And that's a given. Even within our own meetings, even what we're doing ourselves during this lockdown, we're working out as a team, and many of us, do we have to make that special trip into the council building through heavy traffic for a 1 hour meeting when in point of fact we could all just do a Zoom and carry on in our neighbourhoods and that kind of thing. Also, another observation that was made about discovering which people from the organisation lives up your street, because you're now becoming more aware of your own neighbourhood. So I think we are, through this COVID time, if you like, all of us are rethinking, myself included, of how we live our lives, how we relate to our neighbourhoods. So I think we're going to be looking at some quite potentially significant changes of behaviour moving forward. I think it's very important, for example, if we're going to be talking about a leadership in this area, we are involving Te Waka and all of the arms, tourism, Waikato, the economic development arm, etc. I think, obviously, and I agree with the Deputy Mayor, that we have huge challenges. We all know that in terms of our annual plan moving forward. And how do we best, for example, manage our vehicle fleet moving on? And we can talk about, purchase of electric vehicles, and that's taking capital. It's not lost on me that the Karo Street car park, maybe that's all changed now, is full of these big, gigantic ute diesel guzzling vehicles in our own Karo Street car park. That used to be used for community groups. We now, apparently council in its wisdom, got rid of all the access parking for various community, for other groups and public, and it has to replace them with all these big sort of truck things. And I think that's a good example. Again, we have to show leadership. I know we're going to be looking at vehicle share and ride share and some of the other sort of things that we're doing. But I do think what I'm looking through particularly Councillor Forsyth and Thompson, through our Environment Committee and all the other committees, is we do need to talk, Richard. Okay. Let me finish, and I'll just finish, and I'll come to my 1 minute. We do need to ensure that we are showing some genuine corporate leadership, Your Worship.
Thank you. It is difficult to put a timer on, but I will, if we can't keep within a reasonable amount, have to put a beeping phone timer. But well done, Martin. You finished bang on 3, so great. Thank you. I only have left Councillor Bunting and myself, I think. Councillor Bunting, who incidentally was one of my ride share along with Councillor Pascoe when I had my ankle operation. So thank you for that. No, we can't hear you, Mark.
There we go. Is that better? Can you hear that?
Yep.
Yes, yes, right there, testing, 1, 2, yes, hello, yeah, working. Councillor McPherson raised a really interesting point, I thought, in his debate when he was talking about the picture we've suddenly got of the world when COVID took over. Lockdown has really shown us, and it's given us a rare glimpse as to what the world can be like when nature takes her world back. And I'm actually really grateful for that, notwithstanding all the pain that the economy and everyone's going through. We've seen the green space growing again. We've seen the air clearing. We've seen the communities revert back to the simple things that made them communities in the first place. We've seen Foursquare chalk drawings turn up on streets. We've seen people claiming their streets. We've seen people walking in our beautiful green spaces, people picnicking. I'm really grateful for that picture we've got, and that actually exacts where we are trying to head to. When I started as a councillor, only 4 years ago, a whole lot of layers came on to the way we needed to think. There was balancing the books, there was growth, there was debt, there was Mangai Māori, and now there is the climate change considerations as well. And that's a lot of filters to make any decision through, but they're not mutually exclusive. I say bring it on. I say bring it on. This I don't see as a coffee table plan. I see this as something that filters through pretty much everything we do. And it's really interesting. I'm also really grateful to Julie and the team for the great work you've done. We didn't declare a climate emergency, and I'd be interested to parallel the work we're doing against some of those councils who did rush to declare a climate emergency and just see if how we're tracking against them. But I would say this, we don't have to wait for this plan to be finished for us to become a more climate friendly council. I say live it now. Live the ideas that are popping up now. We don't wait for it to be finalised and then suddenly become climate friendly. I love looking at these reports coming out and thinking that's a great idea. I might try that. Hence the e-biking, hence the little rubbish bins, and all the other stuff I'm trying to do as this goes. So I actually hope that by the time this plan is finally written and finally passed and finally agreed, we actually don't need it to be. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. That's me, and then I'll say a few things, and then before give right a reply back to Councillor Wilson. First of all, just want to start with a couple of votes of thanks. Staff, thanks Julie and staff for the work that you've done, but also thanks to Margaret and to Sarah for the work they've done through the Environmental Committee that has broadened this whole area of work done. And considering that we have been thrust into some really peculiar times and things kind of at one point came to a grinding halt, we've actually achieved quite a bit, and I feel quite optimistic that going forward and being able to incorporate that wider thinking of the community will get even further. I just want to pick up on both a number of good comments from others, including Councillor Bunting and Deputy Mayor Taylor, who are absolutely right. There's no reason why we can't do practical things now. From my view, we should be infusing a climate change consideration, as Margaret also said, into our everyday business. So this is not necessarily about new or expensive projects for council to pick up. This is about making climate change the centre of what we do and doing things better, working smarter, in fact. There's no magic bullet to going green or to dealing with climate, because if there were, it would have been presented. So we've got to be practical about what we can do right now, and what we can do right now, we should start to do it. So I'm very much on board with that point. I believe there's some really big win-wins to come out of this. I think we will deliver some cost savings as well as savings in terms of carbon emissions. And we'll get some of those wonderful gains that Councillor Bunting was talking about before with cleaner air, nicer green spaces as well. But we'll actually get some tangible cost savings, and that's good for ratepayers because, that's using money efficiently and wisely as well. So I'll leave my debate there and say thank you for all the really good comments and debate and questions that were generated. Work in progress. Look forward to seeing what the Environment Committee, where they take this and when they come back to us next with it. So thank you for that. Right of reply, Councillor Wilson.
Not required. Thank you, Mayor Paul.
Thank you. So we have a mover, which was Councillor Wilson, and we have a seconder, which was Councillor Thompson. All in favour, please raise your hands and allow me to count. Thank you. Angela, have you got your hand up? Oh, sorry, just counting. Okay, anyone against? Put your hand up. Anyone against now? No. And that's everyone. We got it, Becca? Did you manage to capture that? Or do you need?
Yes,
do you want me to read out the names?
I know, that's okay. I have managed to get that. I'm just trying to work out if we've got someone missing. Don't think we do.
Yeah, I did the same too. So it's yeah.
Kesh is missing.
Some who?
I think
Kesh. No, Kesh, you were there, were you? So you're 4?
Oh, she's there.
I've just done a quick count and we've got everyone. So yes, it's carried.
Thank you. So sometimes I will call the names if I'm not sure that I'm seeing everyone. Otherwise, that I think I knew that was going to be unanimous. Unanimous, not unanimous. Unanimous. All right, thank you, everybody. We are going to take a 10-minute stretch in German. You can go grab yourself a coffee, bring it back, get a comfort stop, and then we'll go through to lunch after that. We might be through a large part of the business. See you soon. Nappies.
That's a good thing.
We are.
Leaders. We're leaders. That's what we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're human.
Exactly.
Well, what do they say? Politicians are like nappies, eh? They're full of the same stuff and they get changed.
We are moving back to live now.
Okay, and behave. Well, okay, so welcome back, everyone. We're now recording the meeting, and we're on to item. Lost my page now. It's the
Item 10.
yeah, item 10. I'm just trying to scroll down to it.
What page, please?
Page 60, item 10.
Yeah, I'm getting there. And there. I've shot it, overshot it. I've overshot it. Here we go. Right, thank you. This is the item on the easement. Sean, Sean, you're going to talk to this one for us?
Yes, I am, Mayor. Thank you for that. Look, I'm hoping that the paper is very self-explanatory. This is essentially a very, very long overdue piece of housekeeping that should have been done probably by the time the Clauden's facility was built, relating to an easement for well networks to get access to some of their plant on site. They have been doing so for as long as they have been doing so for the last 10 or 11 years, I guess, with no issues. And we really just want to get the paperwork caught up with. So that's why we're seeking your approval to do so, because it's outside of the CE's delegation.
Happy to move.
Happy to see.
I'll move.
So Margaret's up. Margaret's got a comment or question.
Just a question really. Is you well, I think it's pretty straightforward, thanks, Sean. But just one question, why has it taken so long? Broadland's been up for how long? 10 years?
Look, I can't answer that question. I didn't even know about it myself until I saw this paper come through for my approval. It's just something that people had not got on to.
Okay, so it has been moved. I know, crazy, isn't it? It slipped through. Mark, you moved, did you? I heard noises.
Yes.
And Jeff, you seconded. Thank you. Okay, so it's been moved. Any other questions? No. If not, it's been moved. It's been seconded. Is there anything anybody wants to say on that?
No.
No. All right. Please raise hands. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I don't see any missing. Anybody opposed? No, Becca, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us on to the next item. Scrolling, which is from the governance team. So there's a few bits in it, so we'll just kind of navigate this. Remember the recommendation that's going to the annual plan now, so I won't spend any time on that too. So I'd ask you not to direct your questions or commentary to that particular item, but anything else. So who's talking to this one, Becca?
I can just introduce it. So we've got two recommendations, one from the Infrastructure Operations Committee. The chair is welcome to just introduce that if they like, or otherwise it can just be moved and seconded. And then the other recommendation is from the Finance Committee meeting around the financial strategy monitoring report. So these are just recommendations from those two committees to council because they sit outside the committee delegation.
Councillor O'Leary, would you like to say anything on respect to the first item?
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Southgate. Just that it's a simple process recommendation that the committee has determined that the bylaw is the right way to go about managing our stormwater, and then staff will go away after this and prepare a statement of proposal and then public consult.
Thank you. Councillor Pascoe, would you like to say something on the item of finance? And then I'll get to questions shortly.
Yes, simply to say that this is the recommendation from the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee, of course, comprises all the members on council, and this was a recommendation coming to council in terms of the financial strategy monitoring report from Tuesday's meeting. And
thank you.
When you're ready, I'll move.
So it's been moved by Councillor Pascoe. Happy to second that, Councillor O'Leary? Yeah, thank you. Questions? Councillor Gallagher.
No, I'll talk to you later about process, but so what? I'm fine. I'm cool.
Oh, okay. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. We might have brought this up earlier. It was just concerning the Suburban Response Team trial. What Rebecca sent through an email I think yesterday, around the fact that it should have been referred directly to the annual plan council agenda. So does this need amending, this section?
So it has already been amended via the confirmation of the agenda.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Thank you. Good point though. All right, it's been moved, it's been seconded. All in favour, please raise your hands. Thanks, Dave. Opposed? No, so that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Just takes a bit of a time to count all the hands. Okay, thank you, councillors. We're now on to the next item, which is resolution to exclude the public. Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
Councillor Forsyth moves. Councillor O'Leary. Oh, Councillor Wilson seconds that we move into public. All in favour? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so we move into public. We'll stop recording. We'll let Amy know. Will let us know, and that will give me a chance to open up the other agenda.